I am glad to be back here again. I'm sorry we don't have any cake and coffee. That I miss the most. But we finally get to meet our heroine. In the order of the title, the daughter is Kathy Williams, of a daughter, mama of a queen, Ayaya, one of the 6,000 virgin warrior wives of King Gizo, the greatest of the 12 kings of Dahomey. Every night, Ayaya told Kathy stories about Africa and life as a warrior queen. The strongest, fleetest girls from the kingdom of Dahomey were brought to Ouida, the magnificent 30 feet high, 21-mile long, mud-walled city, where they were trained and tested. They ran barefoot over burning sand, shot flintlock muskets with flowers scrolled into the silver trigger plates. They wrestled with each other and stormed acacia thorn barriers. She wore a blue tunic and carried a saber that gleamed in the sun, and stood shoulder to shoulder with the bravest, strongest girls in the kingdom in a line as straight as an iron bar. And dignitaries from all around the world came to visit and called them Les Amazones. She and other warrior wives were out on a hunt for a rogue elephant when they were captured by a member of another tribe, the Yoruba. The Yorubas did to Ayaya exactly what her people would have done to an enemy they captured. They sold her off to the Portuguese. In Ayaya's account, we find the source of Kathy's strength of character, her determination, her independence. Ayaya was a captive, and that's what she raised Mama knowing, and that's what Mama raised me knowing. We were captives, prisoners of war, never slaves, captives. The women are marked with a row of tiny round scars, 30 in all, like black pearls between their collarbone and heart. The author is Sarah Byrd. Her degrees are from the University of Texas and the University of New Mexico. She lives in Austin and has been voted Austin's favorite author 4 times. She is a prolific writer of novels, screenplays, and articles, and for many years has been writing for Texas Monthly. She was invited to be honored by the Texas legislature in 2017 for her book, Love Letters to Texas Women, as she called them, the stars of my own personal galaxy of Texas women heroes, Molly Ivins, Ann Richards, Lady Bird Johnson, and Barbara Jordan. Upon learning the honor was to be in the form of a legislative resolution, which would simply be read into the record, she realized she would not be giving a speech. In her words, simply accepting an honor from the Texas legislature will seem like I support them without question. And I have many, many questions which I would welcome the opportunity to share. Since you mentioned my small book, Love Letter to Texas Women, I would especially like to plead with this august group to stop using the bodies of Texas women as a political battleground. I would also like to bear witness to the fact that I absolutely would never have become a writer or even the person I was meant to be without access to safe, affordable women's health care. If I will be allowed to do what I am honored for, to truly be the role model you refer to me as and speak out, then I wholeheartedly accept. If not, then I'm afraid I cannot accept. I eagerly await your reply." Byrd continues, "I received a genuinely courteous response from the genuinely well-intentioned organizer. I regret that you won't be attending." Moving from her activism to her craft, she is meticulous, imaginative, and tenacious. She first heard about Kathy Williams in the late 70s while researching African American rodeos. The facts that percolated for 40 years are few. Kathy Williams was born a slave in Missouri around 1844. As contraband, she was conscripted as a cook's helper with Union General Philip Sheridan, marching through the decisive scorched earth Shenandoah Valley campaign of 1864. She joined the United States Army in 1866 as a man and was sent to fight in the Indian Wars in the Southwest. When she got sick, a doctor examined her and discovered she was a woman. She was discharged in 1866 and later ran a boarding house in a mining town in Colorado. Under this umbrella of facts, Byrd weaves a truly interesting, mesmerizing story. Byrd is painstakingly and intense in her research. Read the acknowledgments, something I sometimes tend to ignore. It has much to say about Byrd and her heroine. There you read about a teacher's plea, "My students need books about heroes who look like them." And I have heard this before. And you see how much she studied the Buffalo Soldiers, their heritage societies and museums, and various historic sites, including Fort Davis and Fort Clark. And then her dedication is there. A tribute in fiction inspired by the singular decision made by Kathy Williams, the first woman to enlist in the peacetime U.S. Army, and the only to ever serve 1866 to 1868 with the fabled Buffalo Soldiers. Byrd is highly praised by authors we know and admire. This is what some of them have said about Daughter of a Queen. S.C. Gwynne, who's the author of Empire of the Summer Moon, writes, "Kathy Williams has one of the most remarkable narrative voices. I was carried into her world, which means into the heart of the Civil War, and later into the heart of the Old West. Byrd's use of history is terrific throughout." From Kristen Hanna, author of The Nightingale and the new Four Winds, which is about the Dust Bowl and the Panhandle and is now being made into a movie. Witty, heartbreaking, and deeply honest, carefully researched, you'll be swept away by the passion and power of this remarkable, trailblazing woman who risked everything to follow her own heart. Christina Baker Klein, author of Orphan Train and The Exiles, which is a selection for us for next year, writes, "An epic page-turner, Daughter of a Queen is inspired by the real-life story of a feisty and fearless Kathy Williams, the first woman to serve in the peacetime U.S. military. She takes this American heroine from forgotten to unforgettable." And Jan Jarboe Russell, "Jewel of a story, best novel I've read in a long time, mesmerizing rendering of Kathy Williams, sacrifices of an African-American woman who defied racial and gender stereotypes. Few books make me weep. Daughter of a Queen had me sobbing. That's what Jan Jarbo Russell said. Now to the novel. If I ask you to raise your hands, do you ever read a book twice? Once you've read a book, do you open it again? Mostly not. Unless, of course, you're going to review it, and then you read it again and again. And so I discovered Kathy Williams and her story a second time, and a real appreciation for Byrd's writing. As Wynne pointed out, she draws you into the story so that it's hard to put the book down, and I found that to be true. I found a deep appreciation for her descriptive narrative. Were there any of you, while reading about limbs and bills enduring the merciless sun and heat rising from the burning sand in their torturous trek across the desert, are there any of you who didn't have to put the book down and go get a drink of water? I did. And there's this description. The farther west we rode, the drier it got. All the plants had turned on us. Gone were such as the sweet and gentle weeping willow that couldn't have slapped a housefly in a hurricane. Instead of being the kind friends that did not but feed and clothe and shelter, plants became sworn enemies, dedicated to killing us and every other creature that passed by. They had the names to prove it, too. Spanish dagger, devil's darning needle, horse crippler, Apache lance, crucifixion thorn, and coach whip. I think she had fun writing the delicious phrases and colloquialisms. Crazy as a peach orchard boar. And Mama never gave a shovel full of fleas about being liked. And a bushel of sweet corn tumped over. And what about her characterizations? Did you ever meet more disgusting villains than these? Rude, arrogant, mean, relentless bullies, and they smell bad too. I did say, I would say they stink, but as children, we were not allowed to use that word. I'm not sure why, but Mother said so, and so that was it. The style of the novel is first-person narrative in the voice of Kathy Williams. It begins at the end, a flashback, as she tells her story to Miss Olivia Hathcock, teacher at the Trinidad, Colorado Free School for the Children of Colored Miners. The time is from 1876, the date of the newspaper article about her, back to the years of the Civil War. Kathy says, "My real life, the one I was meant to have, did not start until an August night in 1864, 3 years into the war, when I watched the only world I had ever known burn to the ground, and met the man who was to be my deliverance and my damnation, the Yankee General, Philip Henry Sheridan." Here the book reminded me of Forrest Gump, as Kathy Williams witnesses and participates in momentous events in history: slavery, Civil War, Appomattox, emancipation, the move westward to Texas, and more. The place takes the reader from a miserable tobacco farm off on the far west side of Missouri, so Confederate it was called Little Dixie, to life in Army posts, through the West to Trinidad, Colorado. The novel unfolds in 4 parts, called books: Back South, Heading Out West, and Up High. As examples of her prose, characterization, and descriptions, I decided to share excerpts from each book. Book 1 takes Kathy through the war, to the surrender at Appomattox, to its aftermath, and the decisions of what the future will hold. This excerpt occurs when Kathy, mistaken for a boy due to her appearance of height and apparel of breeches, is declared contraband by General Sheridan, who proclaims, "The boy a splendid specimen," and further orders, "Colonel, liberate the boy. It is decided. You shall come with me and be my cook's helper." She is unceremoniously dumped into the back of a wagon and transported with provisions confiscated from farms and towns as the troops traveled to the camp, to be taken to General Sheridan's cook, Solomon, described as this: "He was a sight, and not one for sore eyes. The man had one of those long, narrow faces made for frowning and scowling, which he did plenty of. Freckles spattered the high cheeks like specks of molasses. Skinny as a scarecrow, he had a strange menagerie of garments flapping about him. He wore a top hat, looked to have been sat on a time or two, a pair of bottle green breeches, near covered in gaudy patches, and a drummer boy's short, shiny button jacket that had a scorched-looking hole below the shoulder where the previous owner had been shot. But oddest of all, he had a long, stretched-out rat, might have been a baby weasel, running free across his shoulders, goosing its head out like a snake about to strike, then darting back behind the cook's neck to poke his head around the other side. Most disgusting of all, though, when that varmint decided it didn't like what it saw, it ducked into the cook's shirt and skittered around and found a comfy spot that nestled there, pouching the shirt out like a roll of squirming belly fat. Book 2 begins as Kathy bushwhacks Dupree, their tormentor who killed Solomon, steals his clothes, and heads to her next life as a Union soldier named William Cathay. Sergeant Albright takes command of the 9th Cavalry, Troop J. Today, we begin training to become the finest troop in not only any colored regiment, but in any regiment anywhere in the United States Army. Men, let me tell you this, they are going to give us the worst horses, the worst gear, the worst duty. And do you know what we are going to give them back? Gentlemen, we are going to give them the best damn horse soldiers the world has ever seen. He is doomed to be disappointed. And finally interrupts their brutal attack on Cathay. Albright took a long time getting his words out, for his mouth was clogged with disgust. There's one reason, and one reason alone, I am not going to hand every man in here a dishonorable discharge. Our orders came in today. We deploy tomorrow for Fort Arroyo. I won't muster every single one of you out, not because you don't deserve it, but because we are the first colored cavalry regiment in the history of the United States Army, and we get one chance. I will not allow you animals to destroy that chance for those more worthy who will follow you. At this point, I realized in trying to pin down a particular passage, I just kept reading and reading the book again. So I quit. For yourselves, read books 3 and 4, and I think you'll fall in love with Kathy all over again. In the end, an aging Sheridan gives her a departed soldier's personal effects box given to the next of kin. It turns out to be Lem's box, but what it holds lets Kathy know she was tricked by the soldiers, and more importantly, the Sergeant Levi, her beloved, escaped to Mexico. For the box holds Levi's razor with the ivory handle that she had given to Lem, and a yellow scarf with an arrow hole in it, permanently stained with blood from a wound she saw Lem suffer from the rogue Indians' attack. She realizes the body the soldiers let her believe was the sergeant's was really Lem's. They recovered from their desert campsite. Finally, I want to address the racial issue. Oh, here it is. This is Kathy arguing with Wager. I saw clear as day what was going to happen. These white men would erase us, not just me, but all of us, the noble and the wicked, Wager and Vickers, Lemuel and Caldwell. No history book would show us putting up the telegraph lines and guarding the stagecoaches, tracking Indians and making the West safe. Hell, they might not even show the armies of black cowboys that rode in among the Texas Rangers, or any of our boys who fought in the rebellion. Solomon, would they erase Solomon too? I have been as good as dead the instant the soap bear tree came into view, and I cared naught for my life. But Wager and Solomon and Lem and all my people who died serving the United States Army, I'd be damned if I would let them bury all of us twice. I came to the sad conclusion I had to live. And these are Levi's words, speaking about Texas. This, where we are now, this Lone Star State, it's the most color-phobic of them all. Not enough of the war took place here to beat the fear of federal troopers into these unreconstructed brebs. And really in Texas, a few years earlier, Samuel Mcculloch Jr. was born in South Carolina in 1810 with a black mother and a white father. His father brought him and his 2 sisters to Texas in 1835. McCulloch was a free black man. He joined the Texian Army as a private in the Matagorda Volunteer Company. He was the first casualty of the Texas Revolution, being permanently disabled in the Battle of Goliad by a musket ball which shattered his right shoulder. In spite of his disability, he later fought in the Battle of Plum Creek in 1840 against Comanches and served as a spy during the Mexican invasion of San Antonio in 1842. Between these 2 stints of service, McCullough's battle was with the Texas post-war government. First, the Constitution of September 1836 prohibited citizenship for Africans and descendants of Africans and Indians and required all free blacks to apply to the Congress for permanent residence. And Mcculloch made the required application for himself and his three sisters in 1837. In June 5th, 1837, a law was passed that permitted free blacks to keep their residence if they had been living in Texas before the Republic's Declaration of Independence on March 2nd, 1836. However, on February 5th, 1840, an act was passed to prohibit the immigration of free blacks and demand that all free black residents vacate the Republic within 2 years or be sold into slavery. Finally, the Ashworth Act of December 12, 1840, allowed the Ashworth families in Jefferson County to remain in Texas. And this meant, finally, Mcculloch's second petition for citizenship was successful. As a disabled veteran, Mcculloch received land and settled near Von Ormy with a land grant of 1 league of land, which was 4,438 acres, and he died in 1893. One final word from a newspaper review. This is historical fiction, after all, and Byrd has a lot of fun mythologizing William's life. She has imagined a woman who broke bonds and sets a shining example. There is empathy in her intent, as well as an underlying sense of injustice and anger in her prose. Now, I hope that you like the book, and if you haven't, I hope that you will read it. Thank you.